My name is Geoffrey Teller, and today we'll be talking about an aspect of our community that we've all experienced, but one which we don't give a lot of thought to: the StarBase 118 training team. Our training team is made up of dedicated, experienced writers who have taken their passion for StarBase 118 and their talent for teaching and created an engaging, accessible front door to our community that regularly introduces eager new officers into our ranks. Joining us today is one of the senior members of the team and the captain of the USS Veritas, Fleet Captain Roshanara Rahman. Fleet Captain, thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a real pleasure. If you could, please introduce yourself to our audience a little bit. I'd like to know how you came to be part of the StarBase 118 community.
Yeah, sure. As you said, I play Fleet Captain Rahman, but a lot of people around the fleet know me by my real name, which is Rich, and that's probably because I originally joined the fleet all the way back in 2010. In fact, this month it'll be my 9th anniversary. And I actually started as a different character, Dr. Joe. And Rahman is actually my sixth or seventh player character. So, yep, I can't believe it. When I say that number out loud, it scares me. But yep, 9 years.
Well, congratulations on the anniversary coming up. That is quite the milestone.
Thank you.
So tell us, in all of that time that you've been with StarBase 118, I'd imagine that your original training experience was quite a bit different than what you experienced today. How would you say the two compare?
Yeah, since I joined, we have updated the training program a little bit, but the fundamental process of how a cadet, starting from their application, getting screened, approved, and so forth, has actually remained remarkably the same as long as the training program that I've known it to be in existence has been. The biggest difference, I'd say, between when I joined and a new cadet now is that we used to not tell cadets that there would be mock cadets with them in the class.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, for instance, I remember my own class. I was actually the only real cadet at the time. I think I had maybe 2 or 3 other cadets supposedly with me. And, at the end of the class, when I got the email assignment, they're like, oh, Cadet Joe is now assigned to the Independence. Everybody else will find their assignment later. I always thought it was a little strange. I was like, yeah, I never heard from those guys again. But, a few years later, we did a determination that, there really was no reason to hide the fact that we were training you with veteran members. And in fact, we found that that's actually better because it let, in addition to the CEO of a class and the FO, it let other members kind of give their own story about how they joined the fleet, how much they've enjoyed it. And so after the cadets graduate, they not only know 2 people in the fleet, they actually know usually 2 other people that were in their class as mocks.
Well, that's fantastic. And I have fond memories of my academy tour, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners do as well.
Indeed. And I'm sure, one of the things that drew me to the team is how important that first training session is to set the foundation of your entire time with our community. Like, I can still remember, my first class, and I'm sure you can remember yours.
Mm-hmm.
Even today, probably, like, who trained you. And
Fleet Captain Nicoletti, if you're out there, I thank you. So you mentioned your first class. When did you join the training team originally?
So I joined the training team in 2012. It was part of my process, and anybody who's going for commander and above, you have to join the training team. You have to become a certified instructor, basically, and that fulfills one of the requirements before you can actually then proceed and become a commander. What that involves is that you join the team, you ghost 2 classes, which means you observe 2 classes, then you participate as a mock cadet for 2 classes, then as a first officer for 2 classes, and then as a CO for 2 classes. And for some people, they finish their requirements and then they leave the team. And then other people, I guess they kind of get bitten by the training bug, that they really enjoy the process. And I think that's the same for me, the educational component of it. So there was a period where I did step down because of time commitments and all that. But then when I came back actually as part of the training admin team. So now I don't really conduct the classes themselves as much. These days, I'm deputy commandant, commandant, so I arrange the classes, basically set them all up for our training.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't realize just how much work and how many people are involved with the administration of the training team. Could you take us through a little bit of the behind the scenes and some of the groups that are involved that, never directly interface with the potential writer?
Yeah, certainly. The training team is probably the largest, or at least most maybe complex of the task forces we have in the fleet. In addition to the core training team, which is, of course, your instructors, the mock cadets, and so forth, we have two other sub-teams that are part of this organization. So at the top, you have the admins, which is led by our commandant, who is Emma, playing Vice Admiral Quinn Reynolds. And then assisting her are the deputy commandants. And so that's, for example, me. We just had two new commandants join us, Commander Arya and Commander Thorin. And in addition to that team of admins, we have another statistician team that keeps track of all the records. That's Commander Alex Blair. And so, yeah, a lot of times the cadet doesn't even know that all these people are handling the information that they give us from the very beginning when they apply to us. And I should mention that the fleet placement officer, of course, is a big part of the training program as well. And currently the fleet placement officer is actually our fleet admiral, Jordan.
Who many of our listeners will know as Tristan Wolfe.
Yes, exactly.
Well, let's take a moment and give some thanks to all of those folks who have been working tirelessly behind the scenes to make the training team the kind of well-oiled machine that it is today. It is truly an impressive and tremendous amount of effort that has to go into the day-to-day operations of something that's so important to kind of the quality of life of the fleet as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. I think I especially can appreciate it now as a CO myself. One of the biggest distinctions I would say that our fleet has compared to other role-playing groups out there is that there's kind of, I guess, this understood, like, what does the fleet bring for a starship captain, right? So you run your ship and you handle everything there. The fleet basically will take care of all the usual aspects that I think in a lot of times for role-playing groups can actually burn out a CEO, which is namely recruitment and training. So our COs, all they have to do, I say all they have to do, it's actually quite a bit, but they just need to focus on their ships. And then we have separate task forces that are dealing, publicity, dealing with recruitment, and then training, dealing with the actual application and processing of cadets. And what the training team does, in addition to, of course, getting cadets ready for the fleet and being able to sim on a ship, is really also to, I would say, protect our community. And I know it's kind of a weird way of thinking of it, but if we didn't have the training program and and some groups operate this way, they simply, once you apply, they put you on a ship live. As you know yourself, when you've seen new ensigns come aboard, unfortunately, not everybody makes it, even after they've gone through the training program. If we didn't even have the training program to begin with, that number of people who wouldn't make it on a real ship would be even higher. And as you can imagine, that would be very disruptive to the simming. You'd be constantly introducing new people into a storyline that suddenly drop out, things like that. So the training program is actually a really good kind of filter, I would say, to really, we try to find the best candidates that will fit well with our writing style and our community.
That's very interesting. To that end, what would you feel is the most challenging aspect of being a training team member? You mentioned the difficulty of kind of maintaining the integrity of the fleet and filtering out applicants who simply don't have the wherewithal to stay with the fleet for the long term. What are the things that you find are the truly challenging aspects of being a training team member?
Well, I think with the training team, because you're dealing basically with anybody that's kind of just walking through that front door, you have to be prepared for a variety of people that you will interact with. So that's why when we're looking at people who are joining the training team, their communication skills are very important, making sure that they are able to handle basically, any kind of situation that might arise. I would say the most challenging bit, in addition to just that, is that you have to be able to step up as the gatekeeper, I guess, of our group, and be able to give that feedback. There's sometimes this, I see with newer trainers, this idea that, oh, did I fail if someone didn't make it through, right? If they were like, oh, this is me, and they leave, they might feel like they let our group down. And I'm always like, no, that's fine, because it's not meant that everybody is going to get through. We certainly want to. We try our best, and we encourage, and we get feedback, but it's important that a trainer still makes sure that anybody who gets through the academy actually meets the standards, so that way once they're on the ship, they'll have a nice transition. I always tell trainers that you're not doing any service to a cadet if you don't nip something in the bud immediately. If you see something problematic, you see a bio that looks really suspect, or you see some behavior in the class, you really need to tackle that immediately, because especially I think once people leave a training program, they kind of get in their head that like, okay, well, I passed, right? I know how to do it. If you don't take care of that now, and then you let them onto a ship, then that's going to be compounded as they go from a class of 5, let's say, to a ship of 12.
Absolutely. So we talked about the challenging aspects of being a training team member. What do you feel are the most rewarding aspects of being a training team member?
I think the most rewarding aspect is simply the people that you see graduate, the people that, and not even the cadets, I would say even like as a deputy commandant now, when I see someone join the training team as a member, and I see them go from first observing to all the way becoming a veteran CO for the classes. But certainly nothing beats, when you see someone that applied, went through the classes, they were a shiny, enthusiastic ensign, and then, in a couple of years, you're like, oh, hello there, Captain. So I think that's probably the most rewarding for me. I think a lot of other members of the training team would say the same. It is also, because sometimes it reminds you how long you've been in the group. Like, whoa, I remember when you were just a cadet. But
you can get to flash back to those times you were stomping around the academy ground, taking wise words from Booth B under a tree somewhere.
Well, no, I mean, it's just more like you were thinking, whoa, I remember when you just joined, and now you're like taking your captain's practical. Wow. I've been here a long time. So,
well, and to that end, where you're talking about fond memories of your experiences with the training team, is there a class in particular that sticks in your mind as being very memorable or particularly unique in some way?
Yeah, of course. I think, one of the things about the training team that's remarkable is we basically have a core set of scenarios that we run. And, of course, because that helps the CEO have a starting point. But I've never seen a class go the same way twice, just because you're always getting a new set of cadets, a new set of CEOs, and so forth. The memorable ones to me, I could say, first of all, my own. I can remember my CEO was then Commander Tony Turner. She's now Rear Admiral Turner of the embassy. And, whenever people worry about messing up, I always tell them, like, don't worry. Because I, for example, quote unquote, messed up. So when I first joined, I had a little bit of role-playing experience in another group where you basically, it was like a collaborative, almost like novel writing, where you're doing chapter by chapter. So when I did my first sem, I ended up just writing for everybody. I wrote for Turner. I wrote for Turner. I wrote for the Mox. I wrote for the FO and all that, and just went to town, just writing out this wonderful story. And then, of course, I got my first.
To our listeners who have ever heard of the term power simming, I think that's about the most profound example I've ever heard.
Yeah, exactly. It was fun, right? And then I got my feedback email from Turner, and I quickly adapted to it. And so I think that helps me kind of relate to when I see those same things then with newer cadets and ensigns. But I always reassure them, don't worry. Like I've seen so many things that you're never the first person to have done something. Well, I guess I should clarify, because that brings up then the other memorable one I can think of right now. The first time is that we had a cadet once who was very enthusiastic. He wasn't power simming, but he did sim. We were having a mission that was totally unrelated to something, but he suddenly simmed that we encountered Klingons and they were boarding the ship and they were shooting everybody in sight. And then he had to leave, so he just dropped out. And his last sim, he simmed himself basically dying on the simulation. And he had sent me an email being like, you want to have, I don't know, have like full honors or something, funeral or something for him. And I was just like, well, I don't know, because this is supposed to be a holodeck simulation. So I remember thinking, well, I'll go ahead and just sim that we need to call sick bay, and that this cadet maybe was suffering from some hallucinations. And I remember being very proud of the fact that some of the other cadets picked up on that. And like, I remember one cadet, she had written something like, feeling bad for the guy, that she had always heard that the pressure sometimes gets. And I was like,
Cool. Hollow madness can get to the best of us.
Indeed.
Well, that's certainly a unique experience, and I kind of regret not being in that training class. That sounds like it would have been a lot of fun. But so, with all of these experiences in mind, and this long tenure that you've been part of the training team, are there any changes to the training curriculum that you or your group is planning to implement in the near future?
Well, the training team has been around for a while, so it's a pretty well-oiled machine. I would say not really a change, but like an expansion that we've always been thinking about, or at least I've been thinking about, and I've told the staff, and there's been warm reception to it. It's just a matter of manpower and really laying it down, is to expand the training program so that we can offer something for existing members, veteran members, and specifically command staff. So right now, when you go for commander and captain, you will have resources given to you. We have manuals for those ranks and so forth before you take your practical and written examination. But I would like to see something where you could, for example, take a workshop, maybe led by a veteran CO, about common scenarios, common issues that you deal with when you're running a ship. So I've been talking with Jordan and talking with the other training staff. But again, it's just a matter of finding the manpower to be able to start doing these things.
And of course, like the rest of the fleet, the training team is comprised entirely of volunteers who, on top of their regular responsibilities, sometimes as the most senior officers of the fleet, are volunteering their time to run these sims or to coordinate the paperwork, as you would, of the training experience.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always impressed by our members in the training team because, like you said, a lot of them are actually COs, FOs, ship staff members themselves. So they certainly have a lot on their plate already. And, when they volunteer their time for that week and a half, they always meet that expectation that we have for providing a great experience for our cadets. So definitely, if you know somebody that's in the training team, give them a shout out, because they definitely deserve it.
Well, and that actually brings us to our last question. For all of our listeners out there who might be considering joining the training team, either as part of their character's career progression or as simply part of a way of them giving back to the community, what advice would you give to them?
So if you're considering joining the training team, I would say the first step is to contact your CO. That's usually the best advice for a lot of things in the fleet. Contact your CO, let them know you're interested. Our usual requirement is that you're a lieutenant commander, although we do make exceptions for lieutenants that the CO feels particularly strong about. But contact them, let them know, because they will be able to judge, and they've gone through the training program. Like I said, everybody who's made it to commander and captain has had to have gone through the team and become certified. So they'll know exactly what that entails, and be able to give you that honest feedback and work with you to get you ready for that. Basically, after you have that discussion with the CEO will then contact the training team. They'll submit your name for as a recommendation that you be added to the team, and we'll go from there. Once you're added to the team, you go through our nice process as I outlined earlier, where you start as an observer and you work your way up to a class CO. Other than that, I would say the best preparation for it is basically joining your own ship staffs, joining the mentoring team, helping out with newcomers. Anytime that you can work on your skills, giving feedback and communicating with new people, that'll help you not just for the training team, but for, if you ever become a captain someday, or even an FO or a ship staff member, you'll always use those skills.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us today, Fleet Captain Rahman, and for sharing your insights and your obvious love of writing with the community as a whole. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
This has been Geoffrey Teller for the podcast team. Thank you for listening.
Okay.